Hello, everybody, and welcome to this introduction to Dime.Scheduler. I am happy that so many of you have joined me to get a high-level overview of our planning solution. Today, we'll give an entry-level presentation of the product so you get a good understanding what it does and what it doesn't do. And more importantly, it should give you a good idea what kind of value Dime.Scheduler can add to your organization or your customers. Let's start off with some housekeeping first. The agenda for today is pretty simple. We will start off by setting the scene. This will be very brief indeed, because why talk about a product when you can show it, right? As the old adage goes, a picture is worth more than 1,000 words. Or in other words, we'll spend most of our time showing Dime.Scheduler in action. It is going to be a fast-paced presentation, so it's not going to be a snooze fest. After that, we will show you how to proceed in case you are interested in moving forward. And finally, there will be some time for a round of Q&A. As usual, should you have any questions throughout this presentation, there is a Q&A box at the bottom of this window, which you can use to ask your questions. I will be monitoring this chat box and I will answer your questions immediately. But we will get back to some of your questions at the end of the presentation. And if we are unable to answer them today, we will get back to you later. And finally, this session is being recorded and we'll make it available afterwards on our YouTube channel. Good. With that in the back, it is time for me to get off stage and introduce you to our main speaker. My colleague Taffin is the managing partner at Dime, and he is the creator of Dime.Scheduler. And I couldn't think of anyone better to take you on a tour of the product. So Tom, off you go.
Thank you very much, Hendrik, for this very kind introduction. And of course, welcome to all of you. I'm very glad to see that you are all eager to get to know Dime.Scheduler. So let's get right to it and don't lose any time. First, to set the scene, it is of course important to know what Dime.Scheduler is exactly and to which business challenges it can provide a solution for you. In a nutshell, Dime.Scheduler is a graphical resource and project planning solution. So by using Dime.Scheduler, you can actually solve multiple problems inside an organization. The schedule of your employees, equipment, vehicles, meeting rooms, and many other types of resources will be centralized. So all of these can be planned in the most optimal way. This means that you'll be getting rid of maybe 10 different versions of existing Excel planning files, which I think we all know very well, as well as planning in Outlook, for example, or any other kind of decentralized application. And as a result of that, you will, for example, reduce unnecessary overtime for your resources, which means happy people in the end. You will see the immediate impact of last-minute changes in the daily schedules. You will avoid duplicate bookings, maybe respect your delivery dates even more. And of course, you will avoid unneeded and endless status meetings and so on. So there are a lot of arguments why a central resource or project planning solution is a must-have for every company here. Dime.Scheduler is deeply integrated with Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central. What makes it really the heart of a company's operations department, I would say, it uses existing Business Central data, and it also links the planning that you do back to your ERP system. The application is used in various industries. I will get back to this in a second, which goes to show that it is also an extremely versatile and flexible application. With that, I mean that for Dime.Scheduler, anything can be a resource or a task. It all depends on the industry you are in and the type of planning that you actually want to do. And also important to note for all Business Central resellers in the session today, Dime.Scheduler integrates really well with vertical or custom solutions. It's quite easy to plug Dime.Scheduler into your service and product lines, and it can be done with the in-house knowledge that you already have today, which is also quite important, I think. But let's not get too technical. Instead, today I will focus on the capabilities that Dime.Scheduler has to offer rather than the integration with existing solutions. As mentioned before, I also want to give you a quick overview of the industries where Dime.Scheduler is deployed today. And as you can see, its use is quite widespread. Some examples of resources and tasks include technicians or engineers on the road in a field service context, projects for professional services or the installation industry, construction workers, rental orders, transport and logistic planning, manufacturing, and so on. You can see them all on your screen. So like I said, a flexible planning solution, and that is exactly what I would like to show you here today. Let's take a look at some of the key features that enable you to work the way you work. In the demo, I will show you two planning methods or processes, just to give you an idea on how these features can make the life of a planner a lot easier. There are, of course, many more features worth mentioning today, but we will stick to, for this session, the drag and drop of tasks to one or multiple resources. The project planning starting from a Gantt chart where we will define the project timeline. We will also have a look at our built-in map component to support an optimal geographical planning. We will also see how you can filter and organize your resources in a very efficient way, how you can get grip of your available or maybe unavailable capacity, how calendars will help you to organize day schedules and shifts, and how your resources can be notified of their personal planning using our Microsoft Exchange connector to Outlook. And of course, as I said, many more features. The time is limited today, so this is what we would like to talk about today in the session. As Hendrik said, this will be a session full of action. So let's just immediately move to our presentation environment, which I have here. So this environment has a couple of things prepared. We have a Business Central instance installed here, which is running in the browser. And we also have, of course, Dime.Scheduler running here. As you can see, Dime.Scheduler is also running in a browser. So it's a web application, just like Business Central. To set the scene here a little bit, I would like to guide you through the different components that we have available on the screen so everybody knows what everything does. And we will start here in the upper left corner. We can see here we have an open tasks grid. So this is basically a collection of tasks that are still open, that still need to be planned or that are partially planned. If we scroll down the list, we can see some absences here. We have some projects and project tasks here, and we can also see some service orders here at the bottom. During the demo today, we will make an example with all three of the types of tasks and plan them in Dime.Scheduler. We can see an integrated map component here. This component will show addresses on the map and locations of your resources. And here on the right, we have, of course, the heart of Dime.Scheduler, which is the central part, the planning board, where we have the timeline. We can see the 5 days of this week at the moment, and our resources here represented here vertically. So this will be the center, and this is where the planning magic, I would say, will happen. Now, everything you see on the screen is customizable, and that's the first topic where I want to talk again about, about the flexibility of Dime.Scheduler. And you will see that the word flexibility will return a lot during this presentation. Every user can basically set up the user interface as he or she wants it. So I have a map here. If I would like to put this map here, for example, I can just drag and drop it around over the user interface. Let's just show the system will always show you where you can put the components. And let me just put it back to where we got it from here. We can, of course, change the measures of every component. We can make it higher, lower. We can change the width of the component. All of this is customizable by the user and can be saved in user profiles so that next time when the user starts the application, that the UI will look the same as when the user was last working in the application. As I said, we're going to have a look at two different planning processes. And I would like to start with the first planning process. In this case, that will be the drag and drop process. So we want to drag our tasks from here onto the planning board. But of course, there's much more going on around it. You want to assign a task to a resource which is skilled in the correct region, etc., etc. So in order to do that, I will start from Business Central. And of course, we need an order to plan. So I'm going to create a service order in this case. And let's go here to the service orders. The example is now a service order. This could as well be any other type of data in Business Central. As I said, it doesn't matter for us if you're planning a service order or a sales order or an absence or a production order. Where the data comes from is not that important for Dime.Scheduler. So we're going to create the order here and just put a description on there. We just put a customer number in, and I'm going to assign a service order type. So let's say this is a defect. We need to go to the customer to provide some repair or some general service. We're going to indicate on which item we want to do that service with this item. And let's say for, in this case, this is a high priority order. So it's an urgent defect. So we'll put this to high. Of course, you can complete more fields here on the service order. Once this is finished, you will be able to send this order to the planning to the collection of tasks, which I just showed you. So you will find a button here when you install Dime.Scheduler where we can send the order to Dime.Scheduler, order 117. So we can close this for now. And if we scroll down here in the list, we will see that in the meanwhile, our order arrived in Dime.Scheduler. It's just pushed onto the screen. That's also the whole philosophy of the application. When planning is changing, this is also being pushed to the current sessions of all the users that are connected to the system. So if we scroll horizontally here, we can see a lot of fields. So we have, for example, here a description of the item we need to service. We have an importance, high importance. So we indicated that this is an urgent task. We can see the customer number here. We can see the customer name, the region, etc., etc. So a lot of information, all of it coming from Business Central. And of course, it's possible to add some other columns. So we have a bunch of columns here, a long list of columns, I must say. You can see if we scroll through it. So all of these can be added, removed from the UI. And you can also see here a bunch of free columns, free date, free decimal, free text. These are columns which are standardly not mapped in Business Central, but that you can use as a partner to map your custom fields or the custom fields of your customer to. And of course, you can change the label of every column here. So job free text 10 doesn't really tell a user a lot. You could change this to, for example, location or any other caption. Also here, the job number, if you want to change this to order number, that is perfectly possible through our setup screens. Good. Now we will select the task. So if you select the task, you will see that immediately in the map, the address will be shown. So this is an order that needs to be executed in the surroundings of Vienna, apparently. We will come back to the map later on during this demo to give a bit more examples what you can do there. And of course, we now want to plan this order. So we would like to assign this order to a resource, which we will do through a simple drag and drop. So we will just take the order and drag it to a resource. But before I want to do that, I would like to know which resource is best qualified to perform this task. And a qualification can be anything. And therefore, we have these resource filters, which you have here in the second tab. Resource filters are attributes that you will assign to your resources and where you can filter on afterwards. And an attribute can be a lot. It could be a skill of a resource. It could be the region where the resource works in. It could be the driver's license of the resource. It could be the department he or she works for. It could be the total possible load of a truck. It could be anything you can think about. Now, for this demo, we set up the standard Business Central entities, I would say, and we will work with skills and zones. So zones being the region, the service zone of a resource. So let's say I would like to have all my resources of the zone north. I can very easily filter them out, and you will see here that I get a subset of my resources here filtered out according to the zone I indicated here. If you say I would like to have my resources filtered by skill PC software, for example, you will see you will get another subset of resources. So it's very easy to change between these subsets. You can actually create quite complex filters by adding rules here and combining different filter groups like skill and zone. So give me everybody in the north with the PC software skill. You can change this to or, you can make groups if you want. So it can be quite advanced. Now, since the data is coming, all this data is coming from Business Central. Of course, we already know when we create the order for which service zone this is and which skills are needed because those details are kept in Business Central. So basically, we can already link the needed filters to the order and automatically filter our planning board. And that's exactly what these buttons are doing here. So if I click here, you will see that this filter will be constructed automatically, and you get a subset here of your resources, of all the resources that apply to perform this task. So in this case, we have one skill in a zone. If I move it to another one and click there, you can see it's a more complex one. So this resource needs 4 skills and the zone south instead of the 1 skill that I had. So and so on. So for every order, you will have different filterings possible. So let's go back to the order that we just created. And we can see that we actually only have 1 resource which is qualified to execute this order, which is my good friend and colleague Hendrik, who did the introduction today. So we will plan this order for Hendrik. Quite an issue. We see that Hendrik has holiday tomorrow, so I'm very sorry, Hendrik, but I will need to remove your holiday. There we go. And now we can just drag and drop this one onto the planning board. There we go. The appointment is now created, so we call this an appointment. And you can see that the task is removed from the open tasks list because it is now planned. So from the moment a task is being planned, real time, the data will be sent back to Business Central. And to show you that, I will open the order in Business Central again. As you noticed, I closed the browser with Business Central here. So I could open it, could go to the list of orders, get my order, will take some time. What we do is we send links to Business Central along with the data in Dime.Scheduler. So if you right click on any data components, like this appointment here, you can go to the service order directly. The same counts here for the open tasks. If I right click here, you can go to the service order or the customer card, for example, directly. You could potentially add other links there to SharePoint documents, to the website of the customer. Yeah, basically anything that is approachable via a URL can be added here. So let's go to this order. Click here, service order. You will see Business Central will open up and load that service order for us. So when we did the planning, the service order got updated. And where can we see that? If we look here in the resource allocation section of the order, we will find an allocation for our resource on the 30th of October for 4 hours. So this is our resource, Hendrik. So if we go back here, 30 October, 4 hours. So if I would now update this and make it a bit longer to 6 hours, for example, we will see the impact immediately in Business Central. So if I hit F5, you see that the allocated hours is now 6 hours instead of 4. So there's a real-time integration between the 2 systems, as you can see. And it actually doesn't stop there, because once something is planned, you might want some status updates in the planning board. If we go back, you might have noticed that there are some visual indicators on the appointment here. We have actually 3 visual indicators. One is the color. So the red color, which you see here in the background, we have this small blue line here at the bottom. And there's also this exclamation mark icon, which you can see here. The exclamation mark obviously represents the importance or the priority of the order. We set it to high importance, so that's why this exclamation mark is shown. But again, for every indicator, you can very easily decide to link it to another field in Business Central. So it could basically mean anything you want it to mean. The implementation we did here is that the color of the block here, it will be the service order type, which will be service that we selected. And the small little blue line here is the status of the order, the repair status. So if you go back here to Business Central, service is the color, and the repair status code here is the small blue line. So basically, if the resource starts working on that order, and we say we're going to put it in process, so we're working on the order, you see that the color will update in Dime.Scheduler. You see this is now a yellow line instead of a blue line. So in that way, you can send continuous updates from Business Central to Dime.Scheduler. So I thought it was quite important to show you that, so to show that continuous integration between the 2 systems. So that's a first example of a planning process. Later during the demo, we'll look at a second example where we're going to start from a Gantt chart to plan our resources. So let's remove here the filter from the planning boards. We see a bit more. And there are basically 2 components I would like to zoom in on. The first one here is the open tasks. And then, of course, the planning boards, where I want to give a bit more information and possible features which we have there. When we look here at the open tasks grid, as I said, we have a list of tasks. In reality, of course, we'll have much more than maybe the 15 to 20 tasks I have here. You might have 100, 200, 300 tasks. You want to organize these tasks in an efficient way. You want to filter, you want to group, you want to sort, and make sets of data of these tasks. That is, of course, possible. You saw earlier that we could add columns here and remove columns, but of course, we can also sort on these columns. We can filter on these columns. So I could say here, give me all my tasks that start with SO star, which is the wildcard, the asterisk. So you can see only the service orders. Or we could inverse that. We could say, give me everything which does not start with SO. You might remember these filter operators. These are indeed the same as Business Central. So we will also be able to use the ampersand, the pipe sign, so the classic operators to make some more complex string filtering in this case. Let me just remove the filter for now. And of course, we can also group our data, for example, by importance or by the customer name. So let's navigate to the customer name here, and let's just group by this field. So now we can see that, okay, absences do not have a customer, of course. So they're not linked to a customer, but all the rest of the tasks are linked to a customer. So we can see here everything which needs to be planned for customer 2. It's some project tasks. We also have 2 service orders, customer 3, customer 4, 5, and etc. So this makes it very easy to organize all your data in Dime.Scheduler. Of course, you can export this if you want. We have some export buttons here, export to Excel. So let me just make a small example from that and just open the Excel file. This will make an exact copy of the grid that you have in Dime.Scheduler. So you will see the same columns in Excel. You will see the same lines in Excel with the same groupings in this case. So we can, it's just an export, and then you can start working on that document from Microsoft Excel. Maybe to give you another example, we have another grid or table, which is called planned tasks, which you can find here. This is basically the inverse of what you see in the open tasks. So this is every block in the planning board is a line in this grid. So it makes it possible for you to look up into your planning, to search into your planning. So let's say we want to have our planning for this week. Let's just filter by this week. And I want to filter my planning only for my people, so my persons. I don't want any machines or anything, or cars or whatever. And of course, I want to sort by starting date. And let's say we're going to group by resource. So in this case, I have a nice overview of every resource's planning, what every resource needs to do. Again, we can export that to Excel, and you will see the results will be the same as before. So, but now with other data sets. So we have the start and end also here. We make it a bit wider like this. You could also add the time. If you look here, it's just a styling of Excel, so the time can be added there. So a pretty straightforward export from the planned tasks grid. Good. One final thing which I want to mention about these grids is that, or about any component basically in Dime.Scheduler, is that you can add every component multiple times. So that means that for example, this open tasks grid, if we add a second one, so if I go here to the profile menu, I can add a second open tasks grid. So I'll put it there. It will look exactly the same as the other one. So we can give it another name. So for example, I want to see my absences here, like this. And in that case, I will put a filter here on absence. So now it will filter out the tasks. So I get my absences here. And in this one, I want to call this one service orders, like this. And of course, I will need to filter again on my SO. So I'll just remove the not equal to. So we now created 2 different data sets. And it's very easy to switch between those 2 data sets. So you don't need to filter constantly. You can just very quickly switch between the 2 data sets from one to another. It's also very easy to look for a specific order. So if you have an order number like 110, I see there, you can just type it in here. It will filter over all the columns and give you the result everywhere that this value is found. And this counts also, so everything I show here for the planning board, you can see I also have my resources grouped by resource type here. See my people, so I can just open and close those groups. And I can very easily look for Linda, for example, which has no planning at the moment. I will change that in a second. So that's for the tasks component. What I also wanted to have a look at is, of course, the planning board. There are a lot of options here, so I will just cherry pick some features. As you see, we currently are looking at a week view. From Monday to Friday at the current week. We can, of course, very easily change that. We could do that here from the planning board. So go to the previous week, go to the next week, and so on and so on. Or we can make a custom selection. So I could very easily say I want to select these 3 days or these 2 days for this week. Or I could select one single day like this. Of course, we're looking at a week view here. If you look at a single day, it might make more sense to show a bit more detail of that day, like the timeline of that day. So that is, of course, also possible. We can switch here to a day view where we will see the timeline from 8 till 4 for that day. We don't show any night times or non-working times. That is, again, the setting in the user profile. So we can very easily go here and show you from 6 a.m., for example, in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. As you can see, there are calendars also included in Dime.Scheduler, which will indicate when is working time and when is not working time. I'll come back to that later when we talk about the Gantt charts. So let's put this one back to 8 o'clock and let's close this menu here. Good. Any other features here? Let me just move it back to the week and let's filter out, or let's show the whole week in this case. So let's take the work week only. So of course, as you've seen already, we can move around these appointments very easily. So let's now say that, as I said, Hendrik was planned for a holiday. So let's put the holiday back in. So we can plan a holiday very easily like this. But now, of course, we have a planning conflict because Hendrik has 2 things planned for that day. It's very easy to say, okay, I want to move this one to another resource like this. Or just move it to another day for Hendrik. That is also possible. So you can move around the appointment. You can make it shorter, longer. I think all the basic things that you expect from a graphical planning board are possible here. Of course, you might want to have also a resource that has the same qualifications as Hendrik. So let me just remove that order. So by just hitting delete, it will come back in the list here. It's this one. So as we said, we planned it and we filtered it. So we only had Hendrik as a hit in this case for our filter. We might want to check in other regions. So we can just very simple remove the region here and filter again, and you will see that we will have a completely different result. Then Hendrik will still be there, of course, but we now have all our resources within office equipment, and they might be in another region, but they might be skilled enough to go to that customer. If it's an important customer, the extra mile will not be a problem, and then we can just drag and drop it again to that resource, and Business Central will be updated, of course, accordingly. So moving around resources is not a problem. We can actually also assign multiple resources to a task. So let's move it here to Tuesday or Thursday, sorry. We can very easily add resources. So let's make it a bit longer. And let's say we want also Johnny to go to that customer. We can just, by holding the shift key, adding a resource. And let me do also Linda, or let's put this one here, for example. So now these assignments are linked to each other. So if I now move this to another resource, another timing, sorry, you can see that the others are updated too. So if I just move it back, the others are following and updated. If you don't want to link them, we have the simple copy paste possibility. So I could just simply copy and, for example, paste that right here in the schedule. In this case, of course, they will not be linked, and every appointment can move separately from the other one. Removing is very simple. We can also very easily remove a resource from an appointment like this. So as you can see now, we only have 2 resources left for this appointment. It's very easy to split appointments also. So I can right click. So everything is available here in the context menu. I can just split the appointments. Now I have 2 parts for the appointment. So I could move this to another day, or I could just remove it if I want, and so on and so on. So a lot of possibilities and features that are available there. Now it's of course also possible to manually make a sort of a reservation of a time slot. If you don't have an order yet, or a project or whatever, data coming from Business Central, it's very easy to say, for example, for my resource, and let's scroll down a bit, Timothy here, I can just click and create a manual appointment like this. So I can just create it. I could say this is, for example, workshop cleaning, and save, or let's also assign a color to it, plant up. There we go. So now we have this appointment. nothing will happen data-wise to Business Central because it's not linked. But for your planning, this is now a reserved time slot for any manual task that you created. If you want to make this a recurring task, that's also possible. We also have the functionality here to put in a repeat pattern for your appointments. So I could click here on weekly. So let's say we need to do this weekly on Monday and maybe also on Thursday. So we're going to do this workshop cleaning twice a week. It needs to occur a couple of times, or it needs to finish on a specific date. So we could say, let's now put just somewhere next week, not too long, save. And save that. Now the system will create every appointment separately. And once finished, you will see that all these appointments will be visible on the planning board. So if I move to next week, you will also see there on Monday. And if I move a bit further, on Thursday, there's also one here and also one here. So as you can see, it's very easy to set these up. Let me just move to a work week view, then the synchronization will be a bit better. Let's move to this week again. There we go. Good. So this repeatable pattern is available and allows you to plan repeatable tasks. Of course, you can say, okay, this week Timothy is not going to do it, but Richard. So we can just easily move that. The rest will stay. It's like you would work in Outlook. This will now be an exception on the recurring series, basically. We can also make an export of the planning board. So we've been talking here about exporting to Excel. This will be exported to PDF. So let's just make an example. We can also export this. This will just take sort of a picture of the planning boards, and then you will get a PDF document, which will here show you the complete planning board as you were seeing it on screen. So with the columns and also the colors included, which you can then hand over to other people inside of the organization. So yeah, there's a lot more to tell about the planning board, of course, but that would lead us a bit too far for today. One thing I would like to show you is the link that we have with Microsoft Exchange, so the Exchange connector that we have. I set up an Exchange integration for our resource, Linda, here. So based on her email address, her Office 365 email address, data will be pushed to her calendar. So let's just plan a couple of things for Linda. I'm going to plan a service order here. I also want to plan a holiday for Linda, for example, here. Okay, so I hope you heard the last thing. So when I said I was going to create a manual appointment, I will just put in as description administration, for example, and then I will also put as an example here a URL in the description of the appointment. Doesn't really make sense now, but you will see in why I do this in when we look in Outlook. So let's save this. So we now have 3 appointments planned for Linda. So let's have a look now. I have my Outlook open here, and the last one still needs to come in. There it comes. So you can see that now the 3 appointments were synchronized from Dime.Scheduler to Microsoft Exchange. So you can see here the service order. So if you double click on this, we will have a order with the address already specified here. So you could basically just click on this and the map would open. The subject and the body of the appointment is exactly the same as you see it in Dime.Scheduler. And I didn't tell you yet, this is completely templatable. So at the moment we see the service order and the customer number and the customer name. You could add fields there if you want. There's a template behind this. So if you would like to add a description, for example, that is also perfectly possible, and it's completely customizable. So let's close this one. We can also have a look at this administration here. I entered a link just to show you that these links become clickable also in Outlook. So that means that you could potentially send links again to SharePoint or to Business Central along with the appointments body, so that the resource can just click on it and, for example, the service order would open in Business Central. So that would be a possible solution. As you saw, it was quite real time. So if I move this service order here to another day, within a couple of seconds, just like the integration with Business Central, and it already happened, as you can see here, just like the integration with Business Central, this is real time pushed to the calendar of the resources. One or multiple, so I only have one in this case, but of course, this could be set up for multiple resources too. If I would remove something from here, you would also see that the appointment would be removed from Outlook in a second. So sometimes it's within the second, sometimes it takes a bit longer. There we go. So now it is gone. Good. So that's it for the Exchange connector. I really wanted to show you this because it's a nice feature. If your people are on the road in the field, they have a mobile phone, they can just sync their Exchange account with their mobile calendar, and then immediately changes in the planning will be reflected on the mobile phone. Good. As I told, we're going to have a look at 2 planning processes. So now it's time for the second one. And we're going to step away from the planning board. After I showed you one final thing here, when we talk about project planning. So we're going to switch to project planning now. In project planning, there are 2 ways. You could plan your project first over time with a Gantt chart, assign your resources to it afterwards. That's what we're going to do in a second. But you can also plan your project like we just did with the service orders. You can just very simply, if I just remove the filter here on the service orders, and I have a project somewhere, this one here, Guildford, I can very easily also just drag this one onto the planning board for myself in this case. And you see, instead of 4 hours, the tasks are now 8 hours, but that doesn't make any difference. So, and then I could potentially make this a recurring appointment. Say I want to plan this for the coming 20 days, for example, or I can just use copy and pasting if I want, like this. As you can see, the task stays in the list. With the service order, this was not the case. The task was disappearing from the list. In this case, the task is staying there because we put a budget on the task, which we don't do with service orders. So if I scroll to the right, you can see here, we put a budget of 80 hours on this task. And you can see we have 56 hours remaining after we planned 3 times 8 hours. So every time I'm going to plan an appointment here, so let me just copy that. You will see that this will be recalculated. So this is now 48 hours. So that's one way of planning your projects. If there is no real project plan involved, this will be the way. You're just going to assign them based on maybe also skills and regions and whatever. You can just very easily assign via drag and drop, working with recurring appointments. So everything we just explained. Now, another way is, of course, if there is a project plan involved, is creating the project plan first. So let's just close everything we have here. Let me just refresh the screen. Yes. And let's move over to our projects in Business Central, or jobs. So we can see here that we have some projects. I prepared one project here, which is a BC implementation, Business Central implementation, a very simple one, where I have 3 phases in the project: analysis phase, preparation phase, and the delivery phase. So, and each phase has a couple of tasks underneath. I put a budget also on them. So you see here a required duration in hours was added here. So I can insert here the number of hours each task will take, or the budget of each task. For this one, you can see the budget is 0. That is because this is more like a milestone. Obtaining customer approval, you don't need any budget for that. You just need to wait until it's done. So it's a milestone of the project. So all the tasks are finished. Again, like we did with the service order, we can now very easily send this job to Dime.Scheduler. So this job number 2 will now become available in our Dime.Scheduler interface. So what I could potentially do is I could add the Gantt chart like I did with this open task grid here to the UI, but I already prepared another profile. So I will just switch profiles where I have some other components set up. So let's go to the job planning profile. It's the same user, it's the same system, the same database, the same data. I just put some other filters, some other locations in my panels. And once it's loaded, you will see it will look completely different, but still the same system. So we can see here, we have a Gantt chart now on top instead of the resource planning. Open tasks are now placed here. It's the same grid as before, just some other columns and another filter. So I filtered here on J. We have our resource planning here. Looks a bit different, but it's the same. You just see a bit more days. So you see smaller blocks in this case, if you don't look per week. So you can see here, for example, the recurring appointments I've been creating. And we have a capacity and planning pivot table here, which I will come back to also in a second, where we are going to look at our capacity. So let's open the project. You will see, since we indicated to plan this with the Gantt chart, I will not be able to see drag and drop this. That is not possible. We now need to open the project, and you will see that it will load here on top in the Gantt chart. Let me just zoom out a little bit so we see a little bit more. So these are all our tasks. Since we did not specify any date in Business Central, they are all placed on the date of today, and we can now start setting up the timeline of our project. And most important, of course, in project planning are dependencies. If one step moves, down the timeline, you want the rest of your project also to move. So in order to do that, we can create some dependencies. We can just make a dependency, for example, between this phase, the preparation phase, and the analysis phase. So we can just very easily draw a line between those two, and you will get the dependency here. So you can see all these tasks now moved to the 11th of November. But also between these two, the write-up and the customer, let's make that a bit wider, customer workshops. So we cannot start with the write-up before the customer workshops are finished. So we also need to make a dependency between those two. As you can see, all the rest is moving along. Please also note that I indicated in the calendar of Dime.Scheduler that the 2nd of November is a holiday. So you can see that this is included now in the calculation. So if I would move this task here, you can see it gets a bit shorter with 1 day, and all the rest is of course moving along because there are dependencies placed on it. So if I put it back, it will get a bit longer again because it calculates based on the calendar. So the calendar has non-working days, non-working times. So the actually business hours are also included in those calendars without going into too much detail today. We also have a milestone here, which you can see. So again, we can put a milestone dependency between the milestone and the predecessor task. And we'll say here, for this milestone, we're going to add a lag of, for example, 4 days. That means there will always be 4 days between the end of this task and the end of the milestone. So if I would move it now with 1 day, the milestone will move along so that the gap will stay 4 days. Good, we can save this project plan. So I have a sync button here. The plan is now saved. Now I would like to plan a resource, and I would like to see which resources I do have available. So we could look here at the resource planning, of course, and say, okay, 29 until the 10th. So this is exactly what we have here. So we can find some spots in here. But what we could, of course, also do is look into our capacity overview. The capacity overview will show us the load of our planning, also taking service order planning, absence planning, everything into account. So let me just make the calculation here. It will calculate on the fly for all the weeks. So what we see here is that we have all our people. So I made a filter here on persons. So we do not see our machines or cars or whatever. We're not interested in that. We look at our people, and we have here a week overview. So per week, we can see the capacity and the load of our resources during that week. So in this case, I can say here in week 44 that my resource Johnny is planned for 12.5%, but he's not planned for the coming weeks. Noel here is planned for 100%. As you can see, well, indeed, because Noel here has holiday planned for the coming X weeks. So how is this built? We can just open the field setup here at the right. It's a pivot table. You know that from Excel. So you can add fields, you can remove fields, you can slice and dice your data, you can change filterings and groupings the way you want it. And again, save that as I did here. I put a filter on my people, on my persons. So let's just add a bit more fields. We want to add the capacity, maybe, the actual planning. So then you can see how this percentage calculation is done. So you can see here the capacity of my resources for this week of 45. It's 40, it's 8 hours per day. This is coming from Business Central. So this is sent from the resource in Business Central and updated in Dime.Scheduler. The actuals are taken from the resource planning in Dime.Scheduler. So Mark here is planned for 8 hours in week 45. So if you go here, we will see here indeed that there is a an appointment there. So if I remove this, you will see that immediately the calculation will be updated and that Mark will not have anything anymore here on week 45. We will just fill the planning of Mark again by the Gantt chart. So we can see here Mark is free for the coming weeks. So let's take Mark as an example. Maybe one more thing I would like to show you here is the possibility to add a variance. So we could just remove the fields again. And instead of the load and the percentage calculation of what my load is, you could also show the variance. Let's go back here. So remove the load. And now we can see here that there is a difference of 40 hours. So that means we have 40 hours left to plan for this resource in the coming weeks. And this week we have 8 hours left, etc., etc. So for Noel, you can see nothing is left because he's fully booked with holidays. We're looking on the week level now. Of course, you can also take this to a day level. So let's remove the week and let's go to day like this. So now we can see one day after the other, as of the 29th, so the days that we also see here, the capacity that we still have left. So we can see Mark here is free all the time. So let's just plan Mark here. And let's put Mark on this task, Mark Hansen, there we go. And we're going to synchronize this again. So what is this now going to do? This is going to create the planning for Mark in the resource planning. So if we go to have a look at the resource planning board, you can see here, these appointments are now being created immediately in the resource planning, taking the day of holiday into account, 2nd of November. So if I move it, what will happen? The whole project will move. But also in the resource planning, after a while, just wait a bit, there we go. You see, this also gets updated. So the project planning gets reflected in your resource planning, which is important because maybe you also want to plan Mark for service department sometimes, and then you can immediately see if Mark is planned for anything else or not. So if you now look here in the capacity and planning pivot and update this, we'll see for Mark a updated capacity here. You can see all 0, so we don't have any capacity left anymore for Mark. Now what happens in case of conflict? So let's say that Mark already has an appointment here, or let me just create one manually, blocked, doesn't really matter, and I just give it a red color. There we go. So now we again have a double planning. Then of course the capacity pivot will indicate that. And so it's a nice tool also for planners to have an immediate overview to see if there is any issue with any resource on a daily basis. So you can see now this is marked in red and there's an over planning of 8 hours. So -8, I planned 8 hours too much. So in this case, I could say for this project task, we're going to move it to Linda for 1 day, for example. So we can do this. So you can still fine-tune the planning of your project as long as you cannot drag it outside of the task boundaries. That will not work. So it needs to stay within the task boundaries. Otherwise, this could affect the rest of the project, of course. So that's it for the project planning. I could tell you lots more. We have sorts of constraints and scheduling modes and then behaviors in the Gantt chart that are very nice to show. But of course, we want to give you an overview today. So the last thing I would like to talk about today is the integrated map. So I will just refresh the application. Then it goes back to my previous profile, the default profile, where I have the map visible. So that will be a bit easier, which is the map here. So as I said, when you select a task, this will be shown on the map. So if you select multiple tasks, let's select a couple of them, you can see the pins being shown on the map immediately. So it's now very easy to say you could calculate the route between the pins by just clicking on them. And you can see here the travel times and the mileage or the kilometers in this case between the 2 points that were selected. So this will allow you to assist in, or this will assist you in the geographical planning of your resources, because you can also show the pins of planned tasks. So let's say you have a task here for Liam, which is planned on Tuesday, and you still have some time left for Liam to plan something else. You could visualize where Liam will be at that moment. That's the green pin here. And you could visualize your open tasks, which are the blue pins. So you can very easily see that these two here are closest to each other. So you can see here, this is an 11-minute drive in this case for Liam. So that's perfect. So we could plan here, and you can see here which task this is. This is task number 100. You could very easily plan this task, take it and plan it here in the afternoon for Liam. So that is perfectly possible here. What we can also show, of course, on the map is the position of the resources. So instead of the position of the tasks, we can also show where the resource lives. That's the home location. Oops. So let's click on that. So you can see here, based on the address which is specified in Business Central on the employee card, we geocode the address for the resource. So then you can see very easily. So again, if we take some orders, you can see if you want to plan something in the morning for this resource, you can take the task which is closest to the resource. Again, by clicking on it, you can just calculate the route and the travel time. So the distance and the travel time in this case. You can also display the actual location of our resources. Of course, in that case, we would need the data. I think I have one example, but it's on the border of Austria here. So there's one example here of a resource who is tracked. That means that something or somebody will need to be able to deliver the data coming from a tracking device in the car or a mobile device. Maybe there's a mobile app which is sending coordinates every now and then. It's perfectly possible. Once we can integrate that with Business Central or with Dime.Scheduler, we can show that data directly here on the map. So I think my time is almost up. I think I told you everything I wanted to tell you today. So I hope you have had a very nice overview of what Dime.Scheduler can offer you and can help you in your business processes. And then I leave the word back to Hendrik for the final questions.
Thank you, Tom. I certainly hope you like what you've seen so far. And in case you want to proceed, here's what we're going to do. But first, we need to divide our audience into two categories. On the one hand, we have the resellers. If you want to become a reseller, drop us a line and we'll get this thing going. In essence, all you need to do is sign some papers and follow a 2-day training session. And then you're good to go and start implementing, customizing, and integrating the application into your product and service lines. If you want to learn more about the product, there are heaps of resources available. In particular, the docs are chock-a-block with useful information. If you head over to docs.dime.scheduler.com, you will find there's something for everybody. There are articles for users, for administrators, for developers, you name it, we've got it. Don't forget about the search box here. Just start typing a keyword and the search engine will take you to the right spot. Like for instance, if you want to learn more about the Gantt chart, just start typing it and you will be finding yourself on the right page within seconds. And within an article, you'll find lots of cross-references to take you to the section that you want to see. So definitely go check it out. It's docs.dime.scheduler.com. Now, if you are interested in using Dime.Scheduler in your organization, we recommend that you find a certified reseller, if you hadn't already done so, of course. We usually don't interact with end customers ourselves, and instead we rely on our resellers who are authorized to implement the product at their customers. If you head over to domainix.com/partners, you will find the list of all our resellers. As you will find, we have partners all around the world, so get in touch with them and get the project started. Also next week, we will be attending the virtual Directions for Partners event. We have a virtual booth as a bronze sponsor, so come say hi and we'll have a chat. And with that, it is time to end, but not before we have answered a few questions. And at this point, I would like to invite Tom back so I can moderate and he can answer the questions. And given the clock on the wall, I think there's time for 2 or 3 questions. So Tom,
shoot.
Here's a question that I received before the call. Can we easily modify the connector and build our custom logic?
Yes, so that is perfectly possible. You can, so we have a extension in Business Central. We have several events within that extension where you can interfere or hook in your business logic. So it's very easy to add fields, remove fields, and maybe make some more advanced planning logic where Business Central is going to steer how Dime.Scheduler is going to work. So that is, maybe the details are for another session, but it is perfectly possible.
Okay, thank you. Here's one on the Exchange connector. Is this connector bidirectional?
Not at the moment, but I must say it is pretty high on our roadmap. So the Exchange connector is at the moment unidirectional, so it's only pushing to Outlook and Microsoft Exchange. In the future, in one of the coming releases, I cannot say when exactly, but we will also pull the data from Outlook. If required, of course, it will not be mandatory. But then if you would, for example, plan something manually in your Outlook, it would also appear in Dime.Scheduler. So the planner of the planning department knows that you are occupied at that moment. So not yet, but to be continued.
Okay. Is a combination of service orders and production orders possible?
Yes, as you saw, the combination now with service orders, jobs, and absences. I could also have. I actually have also production orders in my demo environment. I just didn't show it today. So that is certainly perfectly possible. We will just need to put other filters on the planning board. So you have your machine and your work centers in that case. Those will not be resources, but it's perfectly possible. So the data source doesn't really matter. What I didn't mention is that Dime.Scheduler can also be bound to multiple companies, multiple databases at the same time. So it's really our goal is to centralize your planning, no matter where the data is coming from.
Okay, thank you. There are two questions regarding pricing. Is there an additional cost for the Gantt chart?
I can be very brief. No, there is not.
And how about the Exchange connector?
There is an extra cost for the Exchange connector. So it's mentioned separately in our price list. So there's a small cost included to have this extra connector. For the back office connector to Business Central, of course, that is included in the standard pricing. So the only extra cost would be in the Exchange connector.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all the time we have today. I'd like to wrap up and thank you all for attending, and I hope to talk to you soon. Take care and goodbye.